A diamond doesn't have one side. It has multiple sides. Why? Because how the light hits it will refract and give you a different look. You and I are identical. Anyone listening to this podcast, identical. Realistically, there's about 102 different personas running around in your head. The question is, do you know them? Have you experienced them? And more importantly, how do you integrate them? Because if we go back to the great Carl Jung doing shadowistic work, it is not about the omission. It's not about getting rid of. It's not about, oh, that doesn't exist. It's about the reintegration of you, because in anything, going all the way back to the great Taoist, which really precedes any major known religion in history, and even look at the universe, light and the dark, good or the bad, the dualistic approach of the or, the word or needs to be collapsed, is the word or implies one or the other. The object is and. Putting them together, because the integration of you is what makes you.
Welcome back, everybody, to From Crisis to Justice. I'm your host, Parag Amin, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Dr. Travis Fox, who is known as the Mindscape Architect. He's an Emmy Award-winning speaker, entrepreneur, and business strategist with over 30 years of experience in psychology, clinical hypnotherapy, and leadership. He's the CEO and board member of Build Your Fortress. He's revolutionizing the construction industry with high-performance panels and innovative building material that cuts costs, accelerates project timelines, and enhances sustainability. And he's also the founder and chairman of the Ultimate Business Quest, where he helps entrepreneurs unlock their potential by overcoming subconscious limitations and scaling their businesses. He's got a background in media, entertainment, and real estate, and he blends psychology with business development to help individuals and industries reshape their approach to success. Travis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Wow, thank you. By the way, every time I hear someone read that, I go, are they talking about me? Because we all have those little voices in our head going, well, I haven't quite done enough yet. I haven't fulfilled all. And so I listen to that. Thank you for the intro, by the way. It's very kind. Thanks for having me on the show as well. But I still look at that every time I hear that and go, is that me? Really? Because I still feel like I'm a whopping 16 years old, even though I'm not even close to that chronologically. But thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate the intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, that leads to my first question, which is, look, is that your subconscious speaking that, you're questioning yourself, and does it ever really go away?
No, it never does. In fact, I think one of the biggest misnomers, and part of why, and many people don't know this, and, it's not something we talk about publicly, although I think this year it's going to, because my latest book with my wife, who actually co-published this one together, it's my fourth book, is getting released later this month at the time of this recording. And Amazon's taken us out full nation, both on print and Audible. And one of the things that we came out with is I developed a system called the dual path dynamics, which is a really academic way of saying it's the first fluid persona profiling system that we're aware of in the world. And why is that? Because we've always spent most of our psychology saying, hey, focus on the positive thoughts, when you hear a negative thought, just kind of ignore it and redirect. And that has some power to it. However, we are the only species on the planet that can actually compartmentalize itself and actually forget, quote unquote, and I use that term loosely, parts of ourselves, which makes no sense. It's about reintegrating. It's not that the thought should go away. It should understand what is the thought there for, because often there's a lot of those thoughts that we would deem as shadowistic, or we call the path of whispers, and then it drops into the shadows, that really are there to protect you. A lot of the times we'll say that they're trauma-based, or they're emotional, there was some emotional traumatic scenario, or my own neurosis, self-doubt, whatever the theme is. However, it's the reintegrating of them and using them both, because there's times where I'll have that and I use that thought and go, you're right, I haven't motivated myself enough. I haven't done it, because you're not done until you're done. And often we get in the place of comfortability, and I believe comfortability breeds contempt. And then all of a sudden we quit. And I don't mean that you quit like, oh, I'm just going to quit. And I say that. I actually quit slowly. And it's the slowly subtle quits that you don't pay attention to that ultimately end up into, all of a sudden, now I haven't achieved my goals. I haven't left the legacy. I haven't left what I wanted for my kids. I haven't experienced everything I wanted to experience in this life. And you wake up and you're 75, and our good friend death, who's non-negotiable, and by the way, has 1,000% batting average, the only thing in the known universe that does, even God doesn't stop death. Death comes for us all. Have you really lived your life out loud? And quote the great Alan Watts, death is inevitable. Life is a choice. And so coming to that space, it's not that, those are, in my humble opinion, bad, because then you have to ask yourself which persona in your head is judging it as good or bad. That's a whole nother conversation, further exacerbating our neurosis. But it's understanding what that persona is saying to you when it says, I haven't really completed it all. You're right. Travis Fox has not completed the mission that I set out for myself, not only for this lifetime, but for this particular chapter in my life. Because in different chapters, we have different value systems. Like what I valued at 25 and what I value now here on the precipice of 55 are radically different. The body may look similar. The jokes may have had the smile there. Maybe the hair is a little more gray than before. So overall, physically, we look relatively the same. Ideologically, it's radically different. What I thought was interesting at 25 and when it's 55 is different. So those voices can be used as a positive, but often we try to ignore them. And the moment you try to ignore them, you're only playing with, half of your skill set. And why would you want to do that? But that's what old psychology used to teach us, is ignore that. And I quote the great book by Norman Vincent Peale out of the 50s, Learned Optimism. Well, if you listen to the book itself, his own title was telling you everything you needed to know, and it's a great book, and I love it, and it's fantastic. But you have to learn optimism, which means our conscious mind is the one that actually does more damage than our subconscious. But that's not how we teach it. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to that question.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I do say is, when somebody quits, they've quit 1,000 times already. And there's an aspect, I think, of there's optimism, there's pessimism, and then there's realism, which is usually a healthy blend of the two. Sure. I think optimism keeps us going. Pessimism, to some extent, some people may argue it's an aspect of realism, right? That not everything is rosy all the time, and that pessimism keeps you alive and keeps you striving and keeps you moving and keeps you protected. But how does one filter that? The subconscious negativity and actually look at it like, look, this is reality versus this is just a negative thought pattern that has no basis in reality whatsoever.
Well, I love your answer, by the way, eloquently stated. I know your background is obviously clearly law, but you clearly have a philosophical one as well. So I applaud you for that. I think all of us do to a certain degree, whether we're willing to admit it. I'm not talking about religious. I'm just about the philosophy of how do we approach life. And I think that you bring up some valid points, but I would also say you're dangerously close to opening Pandora's box. And that's not from a bad thing. It's from when we talk about a realist point of view, then we have to define, and counsel, I think you mutually agree, what is our common ground of what's real, right? If we use from the Matrix's point of view, how do you define real? What is real? Then you also get into your own psychology. What's real? Often our perception of the events that occurred, and I'm sure you know this better than I do from witness recounting, is vastly different than what a video shows and what someone's mind perceptually perceives. And then we start to get into the quantification of, well, how do I perceive? Which persona or personas in plural am I looking at the world through? But here's the back question. This is the part that cracks me up. We heard the famous saying, and it goes all the way back in time, to thyself be true, to know thyself. Okay, but self is said in a singular frame. Self. It's actually selves, plural. The ideology that Travis Fox is a singular being, or anyone listening to this podcast is a singular being, is the biggest misnomer, in my humble opinion. The biggest deficit that we impose upon any human being, whether young or old, doesn't matter, by saying, well, know yourself, as in singular. Think of yourself as a diamond. A diamond doesn't have one side. It has multiple sides. Why? Because how the light hits it will refract and give you a different look. You and I are identical. Anyone listening to this podcast, identical. Realistically, there's about 102 different personas running around in your head. The question is, do you know them? Have you experienced them? And more importantly, how do you integrate them? Because if we go back to the great Carl Jung doing shadowistic work, it is not about the omission. It's not about getting rid of. It's not about, oh, that doesn't exist. It's about the reintegration of you, because in anything, going all the way back to the great Taoist, which really precedes any major known religion in history, and even look at the universe, light and the dark, good or the bad, the dualistic approach of the word or needs to be collapsed. And yes, I am a psycholinguist by trade, so using linguistics is important to me. And some people argue semantics. And I'm like, you're damn right I'm arguing semantics, because it matters. And I'm speaking to someone who would know that equally as well, and probably better than me, is the word or implies one or the other. The object is and. Putting them together, because the integration of you is what makes you there. The parts that you would call shadows, or whispers, those, the voices that come over your shoulder of, well, you can't do it. You'll never be good enough. What if they find out you're an imposter? You're a fraud. All those little thoughts that every human being has. And if you say that you don't have them, you are truly in a space of compartmentalization, which then I would offer you, you've left part of you on the playing field, because there's a reason that it's there and you can integrate it and use it. And often those thoughts can be used not just for motivation, but integration and inspiration to push you, as you so eloquently said, not from a place of force, but of invitation to push you into a space of, wow, what would it be like if I actually was fully integrated? What would we operate as a human being, or a spiritual being having a human experience, quantifying it that way? What would it be like if we actually operated with a full 100% integration? What would that look like? Just even fantasize about it puts your mind in an overload space. But isn't that the adventure of a lifetime? Because to know yourself is to really understand where you are in the current chapter and how you're applying both your insights and your whispers, your conscious and your subconscious, and how you're using those as an integrated woven tapestry that makes the diamond of you. And now all of a sudden you shine on all aspects, regardless of whether it's a shadowistic approach or it's an insight approach. It doesn't matter, because it's still you. And to deny yourself, how would you know yourself if you deny it? It's the biggest oxymoronic statement we've made in human psychology in at least the last 200 years that I'm aware of.
Well, that raises a lot of interesting questions. And right. I think you and I could probably spend an hour talking about it in terms of,
fair play.
When and how does it make sense to filter versus not? And, on the one hand, you're talking about, how would you know if you don't explore that aspect of things, right? And that can be applied to a number of different areas. And let me ask you this: when it comes to your decision to explore high performance panels, it seems kind of like feels like a left turn, maybe. Up until maybe you could provide a little bit of insight. Like, how did you get into this area of high performance panels, and why did you get into it?
Fair play. I grew up outside the United States, and my biological father abandoned my mother and I when we were in Japan. My mother was a model and actress, abandoned when I was 1 year old. So we came back to the United States for a brief stint at 4, and I lived in a trailer. And there's nothing wrong with a trailer, but back in 1974, trailers were made with a lower construction rate than we currently are now. Not much better now, but lower. And I saw what it did to people psychologically. And as I grew up over time and got to travel around the world, and I grew up in the better part of my life in Europe before I came back to high school here in the United States, I saw conditions outside the United States that I think, unfortunately, a lot of United States or American citizens are don't really get to see. I think it's imperative that you see that. It influences you in a way that I can't articulate in any word, except for the impact was so palatable that it influenced my life always from a perspective. And I always hearken back to, Maslowian hierarchy of needs: food, air, water, shelter. So shelter hits the thematic or the theme in all of us of safety. Now, it doesn't mean that your house is impenetrable, but it should be theoretically. And it gives you a place where you can come and just be you, whatever that is, you with your family, yourself, however you choose to do it, work, play. Obviously, life has changed radically since 2020. But nonetheless, Fortress became about that ideology. So it is actually a blend of the two paths that influenced me most. One, obviously, is human psychology, hypnotherapy, and how do we actually apply our persona system to the world and giving a blueprint for life so we can master ourselves. And ultimately, where do I do that? But as we were talking about pre-show, at least here in the United States, house pricing has gone through the bloody roof. I mean, it's gotten ridiculous. And as of some of the mega storms and experiences that the United States has been experiencing over the last couple of years, these disasters are catastrophic, not just to the personals and individuals' homes, but cities and communities that, to this day, many people may or may not know that even from Hurricane Katrina, we still haven't rebuilt New Orleans. That was 15 years ago, people. So we have, and I say this with the utmost respect, regardless of what side of the aisle you land on. I'm not a political person. I think they're a waste of time personally. I care about people. I'm just a people person. I'm a P.T. Barnum kid, and I hearken, and I got the great opportunity to meet one of my heroes, which is Dr. Dennis Waitley, when we did our last film together in 2020. And, those are the two things that have influenced me my whole life. P.T. Barnum and Dr. Dennis Waitley is how I got started. And I started looking at, well, how do we make ourselves happy? P.T. Barnum. But what's the psychology of working myself through the parts of me that aren't happy with me? Dr. Dennis Waitley, The Psychology of Winning, was my first influence. And I combined those two. And what I started to really realize was Buying a home often for people is traumatic. It is not a pleasant experience. You're leveraging yourself, you're subscribing yourself to a 30-year deal, probably called a mortgage, sometimes now 40 or 50, depending on if you're going to in those extreme states. You're putting a chunk of money down that you'll never get back. You think that you will, but you won't. It's no different than a car, right? Yeah. Except for the house, at least generally will appreciate, generally. But you work to pay for it. So where's the safety in that? So there's this oxymoronic and almost dichotomous psychology we set ourselves up of, yeah, I've got my new home. Dad, come on, Parag, come on, we're gonna have a party. This is great. By the way, my monthly mortgage is out of control, and my pity payment, my insurance, and the cost of operation, and electricity, and the things we don't think about. And the challenge with it, for me, I really got twisted because my father, who became my adopted, my biological, he obviously left me, but my adopted father, who's really one that raised me, military to the bone, all Air Force, all the way up to a single star. My eldest son became a special force operator, did 4 tours, and did his time for our God and country. And I noticed that generation, which is he's in his late 30s now, but that generation, they were having trouble affording houses. And it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, well, why should they, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. They should be able to afford a house. He couldn't at the time. He's obviously subsequently did it, but the amount of debt he had to take on and the amount of hoops he had to jump through for a house, with all due respect to all of my fellow general contractors and my fellow developers, we know is technology that's 100 years old. This industry, as a macro comment, I mean, in construction, bar commercial, i.e. the Burj Khalifa as an example, is a great adjustment in architecture and building materials. But I'm talking about single family res, multifam stack. It hasn't really changed. Why? Why are we still doing barn raising technique with, sticks and bricks? And we have storms that are wiping communities literally off the face of the freaking planet. When we have things like Fortress, which are high performance panels, which are better, faster, greener, and stronger, and are designed specifically, go look it up yourself, Miami-Dade County in Florida, SIPs are the only product that is rated to survive 160 mile an hour plus hurricanes. Start that. Well, that also includes F5 tornadoes. Now, anything above 160 in generalities, if, whatever you deem as your deity structure, God above, it's gone. It's going to happen. But give yourself a fighting chance. And more importantly, a house that is solid. Now, I mean that solid is, I don't mean in rigidity. I mean it's solid as in its core. Because how a high performance panel works, it's designed for that very process, not just efficiency, but it's also designed for affordability, speed to build, less waste. We're using products that allow us to recycle and renew. These are all things that people don't factor in when we go build a new home. I'm just going to go build a new home. Okay. Have you ever built one? On average, you'll spend 30% more than your original budgeted agreement. It's the way it works. The general contractor will make a macro, this is what I think it's going to cost to build it. And then we're going to come into these cost overruns. Now, subject that sometimes is to the buyer who's making adjustable choices, upsells, upgrades, downgrades. But if we talk about a macro comment, it makes no sense. It doesn't. Mm-hmm. And I got really twisted about it. And I went, wait a minute. We have 9 million veterans in this country that the VA supposedly takes care of. And I use that term loosely for all my fellow, people out there have that same philosophy I do. I think the VA is a very challenged organization, but thank God I'm not the one that has to deal with it. We'll leave that to other people that are far smarter than me. But I know that those men and women, because I lived it as a family member, I've also lived it as a parent. And I didn't get to serve because it skipped my generation. Okay, that's fine. But I've been around it my whole life. And one of the things that I've admired about them is that it isn't just the individual, meaning the veteran. It's their families. Sometimes they're gone for a year. That's an impact on these young men and women. Shouldn't they be able to afford a home? And I don't mean afford as in cheap. I implore all of you listening to this wonderful show, change your vocabulary. The word affordable has been synchronized in the real estate industry as cheap. And often it is, because it's built for profit over people. Build Your Fortress is the complete reverse. We are about people over profit. We design, we do everything we can, and we show its transparency as much as possible. In fact, we're working on a project right now where we'll show you, we can build you a 1,200 square foot home, 322 vaulted roof beautiful house, and we can do it, and we can do it in less than 30 days, move in ready, solid built high performance home, but you can get it for less than $250. Let's change it from affordable to attainable. How about we do that? Because it's not affordable. Nothing's affordable. It's a freaking mortgage. I don't care if you're paying $100,000 or $20 million. You are still financing it unless you've paid cash, which is rare. But let's assume that that's the case. It's a standard operating procedure. The attainability means you can attain what you choose as your fortress. And I believe every man and woman, whether you wore the uniform or not, we have two things. We have what's called upholding the oath, as you can see right behind me here on our workboard. If you were one of the chosen ones that wore a uniform that represent the United States government specifically, you made an oath. That oath doesn't change because we stopped wearing the uniform. The oath was to defend the Constitution against foreign and domestic enemies. This is a domestic enemy. It is not a person. It's an idea. It's an idea that affordable means cheap, and that we keep giving people housing that is not sustainable with where we are in our current climate conditions economically, where we are in our weather conditions, and most importantly, neighborhoods, how we're building communities, especially post-COVID, psychologically, we'll get to that in a second. But moreover, the house should grow with you. It should be an asset. It should be a fortress. Harkening all the way back to the medieval times, if I may, what was the point of the castle? That's where the king and queen were. They had the keep, and that was where they held the treasury. That's where they held their hierarchy. That's where they held their secret meetings, and obviously their hereditary, where we're going to pass this line down. Everyone should be the king and queen of their own castle. I firmly believe that. Whether it's a 1,200 square foot house or it's 12,000, I don't care. Your attainable is your dream. And the Build Your Fortress is about building the fortress the way you want it so that it lasts, it's sustainable, it makes sure that it goes through the weather conditions. And most importantly, it's going to retain its value and its solidity. It's not going to fall apart because it's built for profit over people. That's how I got into it.
That's great. So let me ask you this. I mean, what makes it able to sustain or withstand such incredible force, and how did you figure out how to manufacture this thing? Do you have a manufacturing background? That's one thing I hadn't heard about. Do you have an engineering background? How did you figure out how to take this idea and this dream that you had of, look, I want to put people over profits. I want to create something that's affordable where people feel safe. And, maybe it ties a little bit back into your own childhood and feeling like, not as safe, and having that living in a trailer park for a little while and wanting something better and being able to give back in a way and solve the problems that you had. How did you go from that feeling into the actual execution?
Great question, by the way. Wonderful question. Yeah. Glad you're on my side. It's a great question. The feeling of, and this is not just for our veterans out there. It's our veterans, our first responders, right? And it's two things. It's when you took that oath, it still goes. And all of us as citizens, and let me complete that thought and I'll move into the next question. We give our pledge. We pledge allegiance to the flag, right? That means we're pledging allegiance to our fellow brothers and sisters. I don't care what creed you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care how old you are. If you're American, that's what the American dream is. And we know that the American dream has been under assault for a long, long time, because profit has become king. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be profitable. That's not what I'm saying. There's plenty of profit in this business. There's plenty. Our shareholders love what we do, but we're doing it for multiple reasons. One is attainable. Two, what makes them so solid is the way they're constructed. So I want you to just imagine in your mind an ice cream sandwich, right? And put it in a vertical frame. So when you look at a SIP, it's called a structurally insulated panel, right? It's 7/16 OSB, specifically designed for the SIP. It's hypercompressed polystyrene, which is a really fancy word for styrofoam, and then a 7/16. So it's a big ice cream sandwich. And then when you spline them together, you're actually creating an interlocking sequence. When you look at sticks and bricks, we'll use traditional framing. You have gaps, usually 16 on center on stud. Then you're going to put this insulation. But if you notice, there's constantly air gaps in there. Why is that important? Because when air comes through, if it finds the gap, it hits it, it explodes the house, which is why when you see tornadoes come by, they look like boom, like a bomb went off. Because inside, and I'm not a meteorologist, just so please don't anybody think that I am. It's just, you look it up, it's common sense, that you explode the house from inside out from the pressure. because it airs inside. Now, I'm not saying our houses don't have airflow. They do. But the difference is when you hit up against a solid wall like this, the air has to find a way to move. But if it has air leaks, it will find the path of least resistance, just like water, the other element that we deal with. So when you look at that concept, it's how it's built. And let's go back in time, and I want to qualify this. I did not invent SIPs. I don't want to qualify that. They were actually invented in 1930, over 100, almost 100 years ago. The challenge we've run into, and this is where I am a man on fire, and I am a man on mission. My entire team is, and no, I do not have an engineering background. I do not have a manufacturing background. I have a mission. And my mission was, how do I solve this problem so that the men and women like my son and all the other people that I've gone through and watched in my career, over the thousands and millions of people I've met from my career, how do we make housing solid again? Because back in the day, and I go back 50 years, post-World War II, the American dream was the number one agenda. You got it. I got it. We all got it together because we fought for freedom on a global scale, and we're this close to never having it again, or at least for a time period from, the World War II experience. So when we start looking at it, we're going, well, why were SIPs developed? One, because it takes too dang long to frame. Even with today's things, it takes too long. And if you don't believe me, and many of you out there, I'm sure you have a beautiful whisper that goes, come on, Travis, that's too good to be true. That's your first whisper that you want to look at from a psychological perspective. We'll go talk about that in a minute. Go to our website, buildyourfortress.com, and watch us. We did this with Habitat for Humanity, one of the most powerful, known, long-running organizations, the great, late great now, obviously, Jimmy Carter, post his presidency, formed this. And they're fantastic, by the way. And we worked with their number 2 division in Omaha, Nebraska. These guys are fantastic. They're massive. They're not just, hey, we're building onesie twosies. They're building developments, 400 homes at a time. Fantastic. And they really would be the pinnacle that we would all agree is this is what we call attainable housing. Okay. They're fantastic. They could frame a house in 21 days, which is exceptional. I said, 21 days. That's what he said. Yeah. I said, okay. I said, I'll tell you what, I can do it in a day. They said the same look that your face just said. No way. I said, fair play. You can go watch us on the website. Watch the head of construction. He's a fantastic gentleman. His name is Drew. And we all came out there. We said, give us your greenhorns. Give us the people that are just your volunteers that don't know what a 16-ounce swinging hammer is from a jackhammer. Give it to us. Obviously, a couple of your guys are there. We built the house slowly, framed it up. You can see it yourself in 4.5 hours. And that was slow. Average, it's 2 hours to do it. And this was a 1,200 square 322, their blueprint. And why is that important? Because part of what made SIPs so unique is that our military got to use them for forward operating bases. So here we go back to this full circle of asking, how did I get into it? Where did all the dots connect for me? And where did the architecture make sense? Was if we used it in military for what? Speed and protection. Boom, put it up, forward operating base, give our military men and women opportunity to defend themselves and be defended by the SIP itself, which I'm not going to tell you that it's bulletproof, but it definitely has some interesting stopping power out there for obvious reasons. It's a dense, solid core. When you do framing, it goes right through it. If you've seen drywall, you can lean on drywall and put your hand right through it. Or if you're a young male who's lost his temper with your parents and you punched a wall, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You try that with a SIP, I promise you, you're going to the doctor's office. You're going to have a busted hand. So we started looking at the solidity of these things and said, well, wait a minute. If the military is doing it, how come we're not getting civilian adoption? There was only one reason. One. That's mindset. My granddaddy did it this way. My daddy did it this way. That's the way I'm going to do it. And I'm like, well, that's dumb. That's the same thing as saying, well, gee, I sure like to dial you on a phone, except I'm going to use a rotary one. The cell phones don't make a lot of sense to me. Guys, we're living in the Jetsons era, for God's sakes. We talk on phones. We're having this conversation around the globe. We have flying bloody cars. We have electric cars as a standard operating procedure, but we're afraid to advance how we build our structures. Somebody, anybody out there, tell me where that makes sense when we have an 8 million home, single family home deficit in the United States. That is completely unacceptable to me. Now, I'm just one man, but our entire team believes in this, our philosophy, and we're about ready to change that industry even more so and revolutionizing how we manufacture. Because that part's been around for about 30 years as far as manufacturing of a SIP, but even that's slow. We have got to build better, faster, greener, stronger because we are way behind. We just saw what happened in LA. We've all saw what happened in North Carolina, Kentucky. Florida, it's a yearly experience. These storms are becoming more and more powerful, and they are becoming to the point where, as we've now seen, and I would have loved to have met you about 9 months ago, sir, when I said to the world, I said, California and Florida insurance companies are going to stop insuring single family res homes because they keep blowing up in these storms and we can't rebuild fast enough. And it's a compounding, depleting effect. Well, like I've said, you can be right or you can be rich. I think right is an overstated subjective comment, and I'm not interested in being super rich, although that doesn't bother me. I'm interested in people being able to be rich in their experience of life. Like P.T. Barnum said, one of the great quotes, the art of making people happy is the most noblest of arts. Well, I don't know how to make anybody happy, counsel. It's above my pay grade, but I sure as heck can make it fun. I could sure as hell making fun. What would it be like if you, as an individual who doesn't know construction from a hole in the ground, just wants to buy a nice home, whatever that home may be, what if you could build it with us? What if your kids could build it with you, where you can actually come in and do that? And you can watch it on the website, watch people do with us all the time. There's a different emotional embeddedness that comes to that fortress now. It's now not just a home that I'm doing a fix and flip or transactional, although that's fine if that's what you do, but for your own personal home, it creates a different side effect, and it's palatable to watch. So to me, blending the two passions of my life has really been an intersection that's taken really 50 years for me to get there, to really understand what the mission was and to understand what the path was. And most importantly, how do we advance now manufacturing? Because that was the next things that we had to solve on the bottlenecking was how do we get the manufacturing to go faster without losing quality, but more importantly, get it to the people and then change the mindset of, hey, if you still want to build sticks and bricks, that's fine. I'm not knocking it. Do what you need to do. There's plenty of great builders that do that. But reality check is, if you're going to live in anywhere in this country where we have storms, which by the way is pretty much the entire country, if you under those storms, wouldn't it make sense to build something better, faster, greater, stronger, but it's attainable, it's going to last, and you can finally feel safe that at least you have a shot, you have a chance to survive some of these storms. And most importantly, because the house is built on a solid core, the air leaks. But this is the part that people forget. Remember, with air leaks, you are literally burning money in your HVAC. With a high performance panel home, you're going to save up to 70% in your HVAC operations. And when people ask all the time, they're like, well, how do I know what a SIP home looks like? I'm like, precisely. The only way you're going to know it is one of two things. One, when you get your first electric or heating bill, or two, the next time there's a storm and you're the only house standing, that's how you know your house is SIP. Otherwise, it looks identical to every other one. You'd never know the difference.
Yeah, that's great. So, when you're trying to figure out this manufacturing process, let's rewind before you actually started manufacturing. You see this thing maybe on the internet, you've rediscovered it from the 30s, and you decide, you know what, we could build houses out of this.
Sure.
And so then what? How did you then scale that idea? I assume you found it on the internet. Maybe you found it in a book. I don't know.
No, quite the opposite.
What's that?
No, I was approached by, strangely enough, it started with the story that was aforementioned. And I was brought in as a consultant to help one of the funds who was moving into real estate and how they were doing fix and flips and how they're moving into new builds, Section 8 housing, again, at the time affordable, and we changed the word to attainable. And we said, look, guys, here's the problem. I said, the fund is great and you're making good margins and returns, but unless you're controlling the vertical, meaning from the actual product itself to the end product, you're A, leaving money on the table, but B, you're losing quality control and time control. So the variance was always the problem. If you look on an average, we're talking about the time to build is months. Why? There's only two reasons: financing, subcontractors. That's it. It's only two reasons I could identify. And we kept looking at over and over and over. We interviewed and kept asking. And one of the fund managers said to me, he said, hey, man, I found this product and I know a guy. Would you be interested in looking at this thing called a SIP? And at the time, just like you, I was like taking a sip of a drink. What the heck's a SIP? What are you talking about? Again, lack of knowledge is the number one reason. Again, back to mindset, is lack of knowledge why people don't make different choices, because they don't know what they don't know. Applies to me as well. I mean, everybody has their expertise. And so for me, it was, well, how do you make this palatable? How do you make people aware of it? How do you make it GC and developer friendly? And most importantly, how do we also include the funds, the NGOs, and the charities who are seeking to do things for other people, like our veterans, for example, our first responders, or autism, something that's very close. All those are very close to me. Or sex trafficked people that are victim recovery, or domestic violence. You know, Tina Turner is a great example. We've seen that in the past of a celebrity who's dealt with that on a public level. How do we do that? And we came up with what's called the push-pull. The push-pull and NGO theory. It's a really fancy way of saying, hey, we push it out in the marketplace of going, what if you made building fun? Building, if you watch most building ads, like, well, welcome home, council, to your beautiful home. And doggone it, we build solid. No one cares, man. That's about as sexy as a fart, with all due respect. And it's intriguing as not. And we live in a society where you got 3 seconds to snag somebody's attention. That's the way we work. In my generation, it was whopping 6. Now it's 3. When you look at it, why don't we make it fun? Building a home for most people is a difficult experience. If you've ever done it, it's challenging, especially when you're dealing with contractors, subcontractors, timing, dates. It's a consuming thing, right? And if you're in a space where you have nothing but time, great. I would suggest you do that. But if you're like most who are wanting a place that they can hang their hat for a while, continue to grow their career, their adventure, their relationship, and their kids, then you want it to be a pleasurable experience, and you want that to move in, because we forget. Now we're back to the psychology side. Man, that was a terrible experience. It was tough. We had to go through escrow. We've been through closing. We almost lost it. We had subcontractors, and you finally close and you move in. But you got to remember that all that traumatic experience that you had of either building or buying that home goes with you into said home. And then you start to see this degeneration process, because it was such a traumatic experience. We kind of move away. I don't want to take care of landscaping. There's always something to fix. You know, I've got water problems. I got plumbing problems, whatever it is. Right? I got to upgrade the kitchen every 10 years because I got to upgrade the kitchen. We don't think about those things. They're just operating the home in and of itself. And so for me, it became about, how do we make this fun? 1, and 2, how do we then put it out into the world so people know about it, which is the push-pull theory, but also 3, how do we help our general contractors turn the notes? One of the things we also identified is that the general contractors, developers, in often case, specifically in the horizontal side, the developer more than the general contractor, but still, they're in these things 18, 24, 36 months on these build outs. Well, that creates capital constraints on the company. That makes it impossible for them to move. Often their lines of credit are tapped. The banks get sticky because they're not hitting KPIs. There's variance controls that they can't control. What if we could do that and we turned it faster so that they were making more money? Well, okay. Well, they make money when they build houses, period. Sitting around is like a plane. If the plane's not flying, it's not making any money. It's an expense. Same thing for general contractors and for developers. If we're not moving dirt and we're not going horizontal, go vertical, we're losing money. You're right. So what if we could turn those notes a little faster? What if we could help you out by getting the product done in speed time, so that as soon as the structure's up, it's going immediately for sale? And now, this is the part that got sexy for me. I invite all of your listeners to make your own determination. Unless you've moved to a certain status in life, meaning economic status, often the homes that we're going to get at the attainable level are more track homes. They're not custom. They're barely semi-custom, for that matter. I think that sucks. I think that's terrible. I think everyone should have the opportunity to make at least a semi-custom experience at that level. And with the high performance panel system, you can, because it's not modular. It's not prefab. We assemble on site. It's fabricated to exactly to your blueprint. There, when we walk up, we assemble on site because it's easier to speed to build. But now you get the money you save on building it, and also the long-term effect. You can add into an upgrade, maybe a better kitchen, or maybe better flooring, or a different whatever add on, if you want to do an ADU, or if you want to do an RV garage post, or move it quantify it into something, a better roof even. That's different. Now, again, we're back to psychology. If I am choosing how the house is designed beyond just a general experience, and I'm upgrading, I'm going to be attached to this thing, council. I'm going to be involved in it. I'm going to protect it like a fortress, puns intended, because it is now your proverbial castle, as it should be. That is the American dream. It's been around for thousands of years. I don't mean the American dream, but just having your own castle and your own keep. And so for me, it became about those 3 things and identifying those things, and we did it. And then the next was, how do we make the manufacturing faster? How do we make it speed? And most importantly, I think one of the most revolutionary breakthroughs that we're on the precipice of doing as we speak, we're currently in a round raise right now as we go for this, and we're about 90 days out. What if you brought the mountain to you? What if instead of saying, hey, guess what, Parag, here's the deal. We manufacture out of blank, pick the state, doesn't matter. We have to logistically get it to you. So you're right. We're going to save you money on your packaging because you only have one experience with us. You have the SIP. You don't have to worry about lumber. You don't have to worry about, insulation. All that's done in one shot. It just shows up. But I have to transport it from my state to your state. And obviously, you're on the West Coast. So if I'm on the East Coast manufacturing, transporting to you is now going to put my price point in a different spot. So what's the first thing you're going to do? Oh, it costs more money. So I'm going to go back to the, with all due respect, the affordable version, and not realizing the long-term effects of that. Well, what if the mountain came to you? What if the manufacturing showed up right on your doorstep and we built it right there? Boom, fresh off the presses, puns intended. We did it. It's part of our unique IP, and it's about as far as I'll go with that. But imagine that happening. And that now took it to the next step, which was watching our men and women who have stood on a wall for this country, regardless of your political ideology. I don't care about your politics. I care about the fact that they signed up. They did it. They stood on a wall so that you and I could have these conversations on this podcast, so that we could pursue our dream. They have the right to have a house in this country. They fought for it. They stood on a wall for it. In some cases, they paid the ultimate price for it, and their families too. And for them to not have that, I have a dream that every vet, every first responder, because that's who we expect. We expect psychologically, almost emotionally, that these men and women, they have to do their job so that I can do what I want. When I call 911, I expect PD and FD to show up. Well, who's showing up for them? Where are we as the people? Where's our oath to take care of those Americans? And so for me, it's a pleading to go, guys, we can do this. We can do it together. And it's fun because back in the day, we used to do barn raising together. I used to help build yours. You used to help build mine. Now we're friends. Now I know something about you because I'm invested in your structure. I'm invested in your family. You're invested in mine. Well, that means if someone comes walking into the neighborhood that's the problem, you and I are most likely going to team up. Now all of a sudden we got a community. That's what, in my humble opinion, is lacking in this country. We are so damn divided over stupid stuff. With all due respect. It is a waste of freaking life and time. But I promise you this, and you can watch it on some of the videos on our site. When people come together and they build a home, which is what made Habitat such a unique experience in and of itself, which is why we were so grateful to partner with them and work with them and continue to do so, is to go, stop. When you do it together, it changes you. You don't need to go to therapy. You don't need to go do ayahuasca. You need to stand there with your brother and your sister and you build a SIP together and you don't need any framing experience. And there's something emotional that happens. It changes you naturally. It's a memory that will never go away. It is a legacy of your life. Just to say, I helped build that, not from a possessionary point of view, but from a contributory point of view. I'm contributing to your life somewhere down the road, whether directly from you or from other karmatic points of view, it's going to come back. And when people do this, they change. They get to know each other. They do business together, which is exactly what communities were designed for in this country. And what we do with our strategic relationships and our partners, specifically the Black Pack and the Consolidated Veterans Group, not only do we build the houses for our vets and our first responders where they are truly attainable, but they can actually work with us and come a part of it. And that was the third lever. How do we help these vets? No vet I know. I don't know all of them, of course. That would be a misnomer statement, but I know a lot of them. I have yet to meet one that will take a hand out, but I know every single one of them will take a hand up. They want to earn it. They want to feel like they're part of it. Their natural gladiator persona is still embedded in who they are. They took that oath willingly. No one forced them to do it. So they know what they signed up for. So that's naturally inbred in them. We give them organization. We tell them, do this, be in value. Every part of your life day is organized while you're in military service. Oh, and by the way, now you're honorably discharged. We're going to throw you into chaos. Good luck. Figure out how a grocery store works. Hey, figure out that traffic pattern. Figure out how to communicate differently because there's not a hierarchical structure out in the world compared to the military, as an example. So what if you gave them that? What if you said, hey, you can come work on the line? Learn how to do this. It doesn't take much. It's a really cool automated line. I'll show you how it works. You can help build with us. And we do what's called a V+1 program. And I was honored to be a part of it to help design this with our partners. Is that barn raising concept that you and I talked about. What if we're building you a home? I come and say, I'm going to help you do it. Great. You and I build the SIP home together. I say, great, now I'm going to build a home. Well, in order for that, your obligation is you come help it build with me. That's it. That's your entire obligation. Now all of a sudden we're bonded. Then that's the V+1 We keep doing that until they become a platoon or a team. And that team's about 7 members long. And then we teach them how to be GCs and developers. And now they're building other high performance homes for other individuals, first responders, vets, or otherwise. And ultimately, they'll be able to own a piece of the fortress as we start to expand across the nation now and actually own their own office to it, because they should have every right. And that's first responders, veterans, and civilians. And it's not in a hierarchical order. It's just a lean to. It's something that we're very passionate about. And I think everybody should be, regardless, again, of your ideology or political structure. That's just my humble opinion, because they give us something that every generation who has fought for the American dream, and I mean that literally, is they've stood on a wall, and some have paid the ultimate price for us to have this thing here. And the best way we can honor them and their families is to give them quality homes. That is their fortress. They fought for the fortress of the United States of America. Let's fight for them and give them the fortress back. And let's do it attainably and solidly and give them a quality product for what they gave us, which is a life of freedom.
I agree with you, and I love that.
Thank you.
I think that we should be doing more for our veterans, and I'm always grateful for their service.
Thank you.
I volunteered. Well, I worked at Veterans Affairs for a summer as well, trying to make things a little bit more efficient. So there's still a lot of inefficiency there, and I think that we should be doing a lot more for our soldiers and people who serve our great country. So for people who want to learn more, Travis, about your panels or you being the Mindscape architect, how can they find you?
I'm easy. It's really easy. You can email me. I answer all my own email. I don't have a bot do it. I don't do AI. I'm good old fashioned. I still answer mine. You can email me directly or go to buildyourfortress.com and it'll gets to myself or our chairwoman. And yes, by the way, I do want to represent to all of you out there. Between our board and our advisory board, we are represented by all 4 major branches of the military. Actively serving with us here at the Fortress, from our chief operations officer all the way to from a colonel to a sergeant. So every branch is represented. We are also minority owned and operated, and we're also women led. Our actual chairwoman is a woman. I know that sounds like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, if you've been around the construction industry, it tends to be heavily dominated by males. Why? Whoever can build the product is all I care about. And so part of what we really got into was men and women serve in our military equally. That's been around for a while. So why shouldn't our construction companies be done the same way? And that's exactly how we did it from the material side. And so I'm super proud of that. You can email us. My email is easy. It's tf@buildyourfortress.com. I'll put it out there for public. I answer all my own email. I'm excited. If you've got something you want to build, you want questions, call us. We will get on the phone and talk with you all day long. Even if you don't do any business with us, please, if nothing else, educate yourself to what's out there. You are not confined to sticks and bricks anymore, ladies and gentlemen. There are wonderful, great products. If you don't use a SIP, use something that's renewable. It's resourceful, and it's going to last the test of time. These storms are not going to get any softer. We've already seen it. I'm not talking about climate warming, just stare at it. But we want to be able to survive these things. That's what a fortress was. And if you want to know what a fortress is, look at any castle from the modern, from the the Dark Ages, the middle part of our last century. Look how long they've lasted. Those were just things stacked on it, but they were stacked in a way with thought process of fortress. That's exactly what a SIP does. And most importantly, it's going to help you survive these storms, and it's to survive the storms of life. And isn't that what you really want for your family, is protection? And if you're telling me that the price, if it's a $5,000 swing, you're not willing to spend $5,000 for family, then I would suggest we need the Mindscape architect to find out what your priority structure is and how come that's more important than your family. It's not. And it doesn't need to be. And so blending the two together, I do consulting for companies when time is available, because this is pretty much my focus right now and has been. This is a legacy piece for me, something that I can hand off, and we're on track. And this is my last legacy piece, and then I'll stop there because it's something that you can tell I have no passion about at all. I'm under the process and in the process and being guided eloquently to take this company public by the end of 26. I want everybody to own a piece of the fortress. They should. You should be able to invest in it. You should be able to be a part of it. You should be able to have the products from it. And everyone in America should be able to own a piece of it if it's something that fits within your portfolio. But this is where our goal is. And that was my dream. That's the dream that's been, my life has been built on, between the P.T. Barnum influence and Dr. Dennis Whaley influence. And here I am at the ripe age of 54. And now perhaps, hopefully, we can fulfill this legacy before I turn 60, and we'll take this company public and everybody can own it. And then we'll go from there.
That's awesome. I love
Thanks.
that. That's amazing.
Thanks, man.
So thank you, Travis, for sharing that with us. And to all the listeners, no matter what it is that you're trying to build, hopefully these insights from Travis have been incredibly helpful for you and inspiring. I know it has been for me. And If you found this helpful, make sure you like and subscribe so you know when the next podcast episode is dropping. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And thank you, Travis, for sharing some of your wisdom with us.
Thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, everyone.